Hello, my name is Emma, and today we are going to talk about whether you should move to Canada. Many people want to come to Canada. As some of you know, I'm from Canada. I live in Toronto. And so I thought it would be a great idea to make a video about what it is like moving to Canada and living in Canada. Many students ask me, is Canada a good country to move to? Is it a good country to immigrate to? My answer is always, well, it depends on what your goals are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Before I talk about this video, I also wanted to tell you a bit about my background. So I teach English. I have many students from many countries around the world. I teach immigrants English. I am the granddaughter of an immigrant. So my grandfather immigrated to Canada. And I have a lot of friends who are immigrants. In fact, more than half of Toronto, more than half of the people from Toronto were actually born in other countries. So we are a place and a city of immigrants. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about life in Canada. We'll talk about the first question a lot of people wonder, are Canadians rich? Are there jobs in Canada? What about housing? Is it easy to buy a house or find an apartment? What are the good things about living in Canada? And what are the bad things? I hope by the end of this video, you will have more information to help you make your decision about moving to Canada. All right. So one thing many people in the world believe is that all Canadians are rich. And if you come to Canada, it is easy to become rich. You just need to work hard. Unfortunately, this is not exactly true. So let's talk a bit about this. The Canadian dollar, so the Canadian currency, is very strong. So when Canadians go to other countries, we often can buy quite a lot of things because we have a strong currency. But here's the problem. When you live in Canada, everything is very expensive. So I'll give you some examples of this. Let's start here. So in Canada, in 2022, the average salary was about $41,000 US. So that's what the average Canadian made. There's some Canadians that make more money than this, and there's a lot of Canadians who make less money than this. Now, the problem is you might think, well, that's a lot of money. But if you think how much money a house is in Canada, it's over 800,000 US dollars. You might think, well, what about if I rent? Rent is also extremely expensive in this country. Food is very expensive. Pretty much everything is very expensive. So you make a lot of money, but then you lose most of your money every month because of the cost of daily living. So yes, Canadians make a lot of money in general, but we also spend a lot of money on rent, food, transportation. It's an expensive country to live in. We also have very high taxes. So a lot of the money you get goes back to the government. So again, life in Canada is very expensive. So it might seem like Canadians are rich. When many immigrants come here, they start to work and they think, great, I'm making so much money. But then they have to spend all the money they make on the cost of daily living and on rent. So it's a very expensive country. A lot of people don't realize also that Canada has a problem with homelessness. There's many people who are poor in Canada and actually live on the streets. You might not know this because when you think of Canada, you probably picture a beautiful country with a lot of nature. That exists, but in the cities, many cities have problems with homelessness. It might even be worse than where you're from, or there might be less homeless people, but I can tell you, Canada has a lot of homeless people. So let's learn a little bit more about this country and whether you should move here or not. Okay, so a lot of people want to know, is it easy to find a job in Canada? Well, here is what the problem is. In Canada, we actually need many immigrants. We have a lot of jobs and not enough people to work the jobs. We really need doctors. We need nurses. We need engineers. We need people in IT. We need construction workers. We need people. It's a big problem here. There are a lot of jobs. But here is the bigger problem. Canada has a problem with red tape. Red tape might be a new word for you. What red tape means is bureaucracy. There's many people who come to Canada who were doctors. They were engineers. They have great skills. We could really use them. But the problem is because of regulations, paperwork, visa requirements, college rules, maybe translation of education. A lot of people come to Canada with great skills, but they cannot work in these professions, even though they want to. And the reason is because of red tape. For example, imagine you are a doctor in your country. You come to Canada and you want to be a doctor in Canada. You know we need doctors here. The problem is, to become a doctor, you will have to go through many different tests. It could take years. It takes a lot of money. Your previous experience might not count. And so even though you have this great experience, you might not succeed in becoming a doctor in Canada. This, to me, is heartbreaking. It's very frustrating because we need people. There's people who have the skills, but for some reason, we're not getting these people in the professions we need them in. So if you want to learn a little bit more about immigration, my colleague Alex actually has a good video where he talks to somebody who helps immigrants come to Canada. So you can check out that video and learn more if you're interested. The bottom line is, for many people, they come to Canada, they can't find the job they want, and they actually leave Canada, or they work in an industry completely different because they can't do what they were trained to do. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about some of the good things about Canada, because there are a lot of good things about living in Canada. First of all, Canada is a pretty safe country. There are crimes, yes, but there are less crimes than maybe in other countries or other places. I like the fact that as a woman, I can walk around in the evening time alone and still feel pretty safe. You have to be careful, but it's overall safer than a lot of places in the world. Canada is also very multicultural, especially some of the cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. We have many immigrants who come to Canada, so we are used to immigrants. There are different restaurants with different types of foods from around the world. You can hear different languages being spoken in these cities. Overall, Canadians love immigrants. And so we are used to immigrants. We love immigrants coming here. We love learning about different cultures and different beliefs. So we're very welcoming towards people from other countries. Another positive about living in Canada is freedom. You have the freedom to say what you want to say or to express your beliefs. We accept people from different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, different sexual orientations, different races. So overall, if there's the beautiful thing about Canada is there's a lot of freedom, especially compared to other places. So some people like to come here for that reason. Another good thing about Canada is nature. There's a lot of nature here. Even in the cities like Toronto, where I'm from, there's a lot of green space. Lots of parks. You can see wildlife. So it's a great country for people who love nature. In fact, many Canadians during the summertime go to the forest, to cabins or cottages. They go camping. They go on fishing trips. So these are popular pastimes. So if you like nature, this is a great country to visit or move to. We have great libraries in Canada, especially in the cities. I mention this because when immigrants come here, you can get a lot of information, a lot of resources, sometimes even free English lessons through the libraries. So they're always a great thing to check out if you come here. Another thing that is good about living in Canada is we have a lot of support for people who have disabilities. It's not perfect, but it might be better than the supports in other countries. So I'll give you an example. I had one student who was in a wheelchair, and I remember when he came to Canada, his world opened up because he was able to take the bus to different places. They have special buses for people in wheelchairs, so he could go to different parks. Things were accessible. So he really enjoyed coming to Canada because where he was from, there wasn't a lot. But coming to Canada for people with disabilities, there can be a lot more supports or more accessibility. Another thing I just wanted to mention was healthcare. So Canada has a healthcare system where, in general, because we pay high taxes, in general, we don't have to pay for a lot of our healthcare. If I want to go to a doctor, I don't have to pay. If I need a surgery, in general, I don't need to pay. If I have to go to the hospital, I don't need to pay. So this is amazing in a lot of ways, especially if you don't have insurance or you don't have a lot of money. Having free healthcare is great. The problem, this is why I put a question mark, is there's a downside to this, and that is that sometimes there are long wait times to see a doctor or to get a surgery. So on the one hand, it's really good. Things are free in general. But on the other hand, you might have to wait, or you might have difficulty finding a family doctor. So there's good and bad when it comes to the healthcare system. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about immigrating to Canada and what that might be like. And hopefully this will help you make a decision. Okay, so let's talk about some of the negative aspects of living in Canada or immigrating here. For many immigrants, the weather can be a big surprise. Canada can be very cold in the wintertime. The main thing I noticed, though, is the weather really changes. So it can be suddenly very cold, and then a week later, very hot. Then it's raining, and then it's snowing, and then it's perfect weather, and everybody's happy. So you may come from a country where things are usually the same. In Canada, the weather really changes. I think on the one hand, though, because of global warming, many places are getting very, very hot. Many places are becoming too hot. I think Canada might actually be a good country to be in the future if some of these things continue to happen. Transportation. One of the issues with living in Canada is it's a big country. So there's a lot of difficulties when it comes to transportation. If you want to travel between cities, it can be very big distances. So you might have to drive a lot. Even if you live in the city, like for example, I live in Toronto, to get to work, it can be very difficult because we only have a certain number of highways. Everybody takes the same highways. So there's a lot of traffic jams and a lot of very long commutes. So many people find it difficult to get around, especially on work days, just because there's a lot of traffic. Rent can be a big problem in Canada, especially in the cities like Vancouver and Toronto. Rent is expensive here. I think, and these numbers frequently change and increase, but when I last checked, the average cost of a one-bedroom apartment, so an apartment with just one bedroom in Toronto, was $2,100 US per month. Now, even trying to find an apartment can be very difficult. A lot of people try to find an apartment. There's not enough apartments. So there's a shortage of housing and apartments. So this can be very stressful, and it can be really hard on immigrants because they come here and they can't find a place to live. So before you come to Canada, really, really think about where you will live and do you have enough money for rent for the first year you're living here. Finally, another thing I wanted to mention about maybe some of the negatives about Canada is we have a problem with career colleges. So in Canada, we have universities like the University of Toronto or the University of British Columbia or McGill University. These are great universities and, they have great professors. They have a lot of great programs. We also have what we call career colleges. So these are not universities. They are these almost fake colleges that are created. They try to get a lot of international students. They do not have good professors. They don't have good programs. The diploma in Canada is not seen as useful or, it's seen as a scam. There's a lot of fraud with these colleges. So the government is trying to close down these colleges, but they keep coming up. So if you are coming to Canada for education, please be careful. Look at the reviews for the university. Make sure it's a real university. So be careful because some of these career colleges charge a lot of money and they're not good programs. So these are some of the issues with moving to Canada. I've talked about some of the positives of living in Canada. So, should you move here? Is Canada a good place to live? I would say, again, it depends. Many people believe they will come here. They'll be very rich. They'll have a great house. Life will be easy, and everything will be perfect. I don't think that's true. I think that it's difficult to be an immigrant in Canada. I know a lot of people come to Canada and then leave Canada because they find the life here too difficult. On the other hand, I think that there's a lot of good reasons to come to Canada. I think that if you are looking for a safe country with freedom, I think that if you are looking for a country where it might be a good place to have children and raise your children in a good environment, I think there's a lot of positives about living in Canada. So I think you need to ask yourself, why am I immigrating? And then decide if the reasons for immigration match with the Canadian life. So thank you so much for watching this video. We talked about a lot of different things. For those of you who have immigrated to Canada, Please write in the comments below about your experiences. I think it's a very good topic, and I think people could really benefit from understanding if you had a good experience moving to Canada, or if you had a bad experience moving to Canada, and what your advice would be. So thank you again for watching, and until next time, take care.